He was cold, ruthless, untouchable. She thought he abandoned her, until one unexpected message shattered everything. An ultrasound. Hours later, she appeared at his door. What happens next? Watch as love, betrayal, and revenge collide in a city that never sleeps. Chicago never slept. Neon lights reflected on rain-slicked streets, the hum of traffic mingling with distant sirens. Shadows clung to alleyways like predators waiting for their prey, and somewhere above it all, Ethan Blackwood ruled his empire with precision, ruthlessness, and a reputation that made the city tremble. Ethan's office perched atop one of the tallest towers, a fortress of glass and steel that overlooked the entire city. He leaned against the window, the skyline reflected in his icy blue eyes. Handsome, dangerous, untouchable, his presence alone demanded attention, and every decision he made rippled through the underworld like a stone tossed into a stormy lake. Loyalty was earned, fear was mandatory. He understood both and he wielded them like a blade. Tonight, though, the city had summoned him elsewhere. A gala, ostensibly charitable, but in reality, a stage for the elite and the powerful. A place where favors were bought, alliances brokered, and enemies observed one another in silk and champagne. Ethan walked in like a predator in tailored navy blue, every button precise, every step deliberate. Conversation hushed as he passed. Whispers followed. He did not notice. He never did. He had no need to notice. His attention was elsewhere always, somewhere only he chose. And then, he saw her, Emma Carter. She wasn't like the others. Not the usual socialites fawning over his notoriety, not the women draped in diamonds pretending to care about charity. She stood near the marble staircase, her back straight, chin lifted, eyes scanning the room with a quiet confidence that refused to be intimidated. Her dress was simple, yet elegant, the kind that demanded respect rather than admiration. There was a spark the moment he noticed her attention that pulled at him in a way he didn't understand. He had conquered entire territories, manipulated rivals, and survived betrayals that would have destroyed lesser men. Yet in her presence, he felt something unfamiliar, something dangerous, curiosity, intrigue, desire he didn't allow himself to indulge. Ethan approached her, and for the first time in years, he had to work to contain the awareness of his own heartbeat. She looked at him directly, unwavering, her gaze challenging his reputation with nothing more than the calm certainty of her posture. The room seemed to fade around them, the laughter, the music, the subtle hum of tension between the city's power players all disappeared, leaving only the pull between two unwillingly drawn souls. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, voice steady, though her eyes flickered with something unspoken. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," he replied smoothly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at his lips. His voice, low and controlled, carried the authority he wielded naturally. "But I find unexpected company interesting." She tilted her head slightly, curiosity mingling with defiance. "I'm not here to be entertained," she said. "Or intimidated." Ethan's blue eyes narrowed, intrigued. She wasn't playing the usual game. She didn't bend. She didn't charm with practiced smiles. And for reasons he couldn't yet name, that fascinated him more than he cared to admit. "I'm offering a private drink," he said, calm but insistent. Away from the crowd, her lips curved into a hint of a smile, not flirty, not dismissive, simply acknowledging the challenge. "Lead the way." The world around them blurred as they moved to a secluded terrace. The city lights stretched beneath them like a carpet of stars, neon reflections waltzing on the glass below. Ethan poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the glow of distant lights. They didn't speak at first, neither needed to. Words were secondary to the pull between them, electric and unspoken. Emma finally broke the silence. "You're not what I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "Most people aren't. Some of them never recover from that." She laughed softly, a sound that slipped into the shadows and lingered. "And yet, here I am." Something inside Ethan shifted, subtle yet undeniable. He felt a flicker of vulnerability, a crack in the carefully constructed armor of control he had built over years. She had no idea who he really was, no idea of the blood, betrayal, and power etched into his life, but she saw him anyway. And that terrified him. They spoke in low tones, eyes never leaving each other. Conversation flowed seamlessly between mundane and intimate, flirtation and challenge. Ethan learned about her resilience, her wit, the sharp intelligence behind her calm exterior. Emma discovered glimpses of the man behind the empire, the quiet moments, the rare vulnerability, the intensity that made him both magnetic and dangerous, but the city was never far. Shadows lingered, unknown eyes watched, hours passed, but in that moment, time seemed suspended. Finally, Emma prepared to leave, her coat draped over her shoulders, her expression unreadable. Ethan walked her to the elevator, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. As the door slid shut, he felt a strange emptiness, an unfamiliar longing he refused to name. Outside, in the dimly lit street, the faint rustle of movement went unnoticed by anyone but those who knew what to look for. A rival gang had been observing Ethan for weeks, studying every meeting, every movement, every weakness. And tonight, they had found something new. A crack in the untouchable facade, a vulnerability no one had seen before. Their leader whispered into a phone, voice cold and deliberate. "He's distracted. She's the opening. Make your move." And with that, the night that had promised intrigue and desire ended with danger simmering just beneath the surface, an invisible threat that neither Ethan nor Emma yet understood, but one that would set the stage for everything to come. In the shadows of Chicago's neon glow, eyes followed her every step. The untouchable Mafia boss had a weakness now, and someone was ready to exploit it. The city at night was a different world. Neon reflections flickered on wet asphalt, the hum of distant traffic blending with the occasional wail of a siren. Above it all, in a secluded high-rise, Ethan Blackwood's penthouse overlooked the labyrinth of Chicago streets like a silent sentinel. Inside, the air was tense, heavy with desire and danger alike. Ethan sat in the low light of the room, a glass of whiskey in hand. The amber liquid caught the glow from the city below, shimmering like molten gold. He didn't need the drink, he never did, but the ritual calmed the storm of thoughts he could rarely articulate. He thought about Emma. Her presence lingered in his mind like a persistent echo, one that refused to be ignored. Tonight, as with so many nights before, she would appear. They moved in secret, unseen by anyone but the walls of these transient rooms. Hotel suites became their hidden refuge, places where power and control had no weight, where two people could exist stripped of their reputations, yet never fully safe. Emma arrived precisely on time, as always. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor, a subtle rhythm that pulled his attention immediately. She wore a tailored coat over a simple dress, elegance understated but undeniably present. Her eyes found his instantly, and for a moment, the chaos of his empire, the whispers of enemies, and the burdens of power faded. He rose from his chair, a controlled tension in his movements. "You're late," he said, though the corners of his mouth betrayed the faintest smirk. "Traffic," she replied smoothly, her tone teasing yet measured. "Though I'm sure the streets of Chicago don't scare you, I've walked through worse," he said softly, but there was a vulnerability behind his eyes she had never seen in anyone else. "You'll have to do better than traffic to impress me." They shared a quiet laugh, rare and fleeting, an intimacy forged in stolen moments. Ethan revealed fragments of himself, small, fleeting glimpses enough to make her wonder if the man behind the ruthless facade was capable of warmth, even tenderness. Emma leaned casually against the window, her gaze sweeping the city. "You live surrounded by power, danger, and fear," she said, almost as an observation. "And yet, you let me see something else, something real." Ethan didn't answer immediately. He studied her, weighing words, weighing consequences. He had learned long ago that emotions were a liability. Power demanded detachment, and love was the deadliest distraction of all. And yet, here he was, letting her in, letting the walls crack just enough to feel. You see only what I allow, he said finally, voice low and controlled. And that is enough for now, Emma smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. She had learned not to be intimidated by men like him. She matched his intensity, his wit, his courage. Each encounter pulled them closer, yet both understood the fragility of their bond. It existed in shadows, away from prying eyes, always at risk of shattering with the wrong touch, the wrong word, the wrong betrayal. Their conversations were layered with subtext, words as shields, laughter as armor. He teased, she retorted, and between their playful exchanges, a tension simmered, almost unbearable in its intensity, but danger always lurked. The world outside the hotel walls did not pause for intimacy or desire. Chicago's underworld was alive with whispers, threats, and those who studied every movement of Ethan Blackwood. And now, one had taken note of Emma. Ethan's phone buzzed, cutting through the rare tranquility. He frowned, reading the message. Hearts are weaknesses. Exploit them. A chill ran down his spine. This was no ordinary threat. Someone knew about Emma, someone watching, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to use her against him. His fingers tightened around the glass, the amber liquid sloshing slightly unnoticed. Emma noticed the shift in his demeanor instantly. What is it? She asked, voice calm, steady, but with the undercurrent of concern she always tried to hide. He slipped the phone into his pocket without answering. Nothing, he said, but his eyes, piercing and sharp, betrayed him. Stay here. Don't move. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She understood him better than anyone. I'm not afraid of your enemies, she said softly, yet with a firmness that surprised even him. I'm not the one you should be worried about. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to study her not as a distraction, not as a temptation, but as the only person who could challenge him on equal footing. She was fire contained in human form, and for once, he wished he could let go of control and lean into something dangerous. Trust, but the message lingered in his mind like a poison. Chicago's underworld was a living organism, and anyone could strike where it hurt the most. Emma was the perfect leverage, the perfect weakness, and he would not allow anyone to exploit it, not her, not him, not anyone. He moved to the window, scanning the streets below, the city alive with shadows and movement. A flicker of unease crawled along his spine. He had enemies, yes, but this felt personal, calculated. Someone was sending a warning, and he had no idea who or why. Emma approached silently, resting a hand lightly on his arm. You can't fight them all, she whispered, her voice carrying both empathy and defiance. I fight whoever threatens what I care about, he said, almost bitterly. And you are what I care about. Her eyes widened slightly, registering the rare admission. It was dangerous to admit such things to Ethan Blackwood, a man who had mastered detachment as survival. Yet the vulnerability in that single sentence weighed heavier than any gun, any deal, any threat. They stayed there in silence for several minutes, the city below oblivious to the storm brewing above it. The tension in the room was palpable, electric, suffocating, binding them in a moment that neither could fully own, yet neither could escape. A knock at the door startled them both. Neither expected visitors. Ethan moved first, swift and controlled, flinging the door open. The hallway was empty. Only a note lay at his feet, its edges crisp, the handwriting unfamiliar. He picked it up and scanned the words. They're closer than you think. One wrong move, and she pays the price. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand clenched into a fist at his side. He had built his empire on control, on anticipating threats, on never being caught off guard. And yet, this intrusion felt like a warning from something far larger than business rivalries. Emma reached for the note, her fingers brushing his. Ethan, who would? He cut her off, voice low, a dangerous edge sharpening every word. No one gets close to you. Not while I'm breathing. Not while I exist. But even as he said it, a shadow passed across the window. Movement too fluid to be accidental. too calculated to be random. Someone was watching. Someone had found the one place he could not protect himself fully, and the stakes were higher than either of them realized. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Their intimacy, their laughter, their tentative trust, everything was exposed to the unseen threat stalking them in the darkness. Ethan's piercing blue eyes met Emma's, a silent warning and an unspoken plea. She understood. He would not falter. He would protect her. But tonight, the game had changed. Outside, in the shadows of the city, someone whispered into a phone. Tonight, we take the heart he can't afford to lose. The penthouse overlooked the city like a crown perched atop chaos. Lights sparkled below, reflections of lives lived in shadows, deals struck in secrecy, and dangers lurking in plain sight. Ethan Blackwood stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, blue eyes scanning the neon-lit streets far below, the weight of his empire pressing against his chest as though it were part of him. Tonight, however, the empire seemed distant. Tonight, he wasn't thinking of territory, contracts, or enemies. He was thinking of her, Emma Carter, the woman who had walked into his life like fire in a frozen world, who had unsettled him, challenged him, and now drawn him to a reckless decision he could not undo. The decision had come impulsively, audaciously, in the middle of a late-night meeting about finances and alliances. Ethan had looked at her across the mahogany table, the city lights glinting in her eyes, and something had snapped. A thought, a risk, a desire he did not even attempt to suppress. "Marry me," he had said, voice low, commanding, and unyielding, yet laced with a vulnerability he did not show to anyone else. Emma had blinked, incredulous for a moment, then laughed softly. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "No games, no negotiations. He gestured toward her, almost helplessly. "You're the only thing I will not compromise on." Her lips curved in a small, reluctant smile. "Then you're insane," she said, and yet, later, they stood together in a small, private ceremony in the very same penthouse, the city sprawling endlessly below them. It was defiant, almost rebellious. A marriage done not for appearances, not for family, not for alliances, but for the rare, dangerous spark that existed between them. Only a few witnesses, only two hearts pledging against the weight of the world. The vows were brief, a whispered promise in the quiet of the penthouse. Ethan's hand held hers tightly. She felt the strength in his grip, the force of his life, and will concentrated in that single touch. And yet, beneath the intimacy, something lingered, an unease, a shadow of inevitability. Celebration was minimal. A single bottle of champagne, a quiet toast, and a night that promised beginnings but carried the weight of endings no one could yet see. Ethan and Emma moved together through the city night as husband and wife, bound by desire and danger, yet both acutely aware that nothing in his world was truly safe. Later, as the city slept beneath them, Ethan's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with numbers he didn't immediately recognize. He ignored it, turning to Emma, intent on savoring the stolen moments they had. She had laughed softly, leaning into him, her warmth searing through the cold walls he had built around himself, but the empire never slept. Ethan's ambition whispered incessantly, a voice he could not silence. There was a deal, a move that could double his influence overnight, a promise of power too intoxicating to dismiss. It required choices, sacrifices, compromises, and one sacrifice stood glaringly in the forefront. Emma. He stared out at the city again, glass in hand, the glow from the streets catching in his blue eyes. Could he truly have both? Could he have the woman he loved and the empire he had spent years building? The thought alone clawed at him, teasing, dangerous, a temptation he had never before allowed himself to entertain. Emma stirred behind him, her presence grounding him. She had no idea of the internal struggle, of the deals whispered in shadows, the dangers circling ever closer. To her, they were simply Ethan and Emma, husband and wife. To him, She was the only vulnerability he had never allowed, and the one risk he could not calculate. The night deepened. Outside, the city pulsed with its own rhythm: neon, sirens, whispers of deals gone wrong and fortunes made. Inside, the penthouse felt suspended in time, a fragile bubble separating them from the dangerous world beyond the glass walls, but the past never remained buried. A figure from Ethan's history had survived the betrayals, the wars, the chaos, and that figure now had knowledge that could shatter everything he had built tonight. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, sharp, deliberate. Ethan's body tensed instantly. He moved toward the entrance, hand brushing the concealed gun in his jacket. Emma followed, calm but alert, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Through the peephole, Ethan saw a man whose presence carried menace, whose very posture hinted at secrets too heavy to ignore. The man's eyes met Ethan's for a heartbeat, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The past had returned, uninvited, and it carried a threat unlike any before. He opened the door slowly, never taking his eyes off the intruder. Words were unnecessary. The air was thick with tension, a prelude to revelation, to betrayal, to chaos. Emma stepped beside him, hand lightly resting on his arm, not as a shield, but as a partner, equally ready for what was coming. The man spoke, voice low, deliberate, and measured. "It's been a long time, Ethan. Some secrets should have stayed buried." Ethan's jaw tightened. He could feel the pulse of the city beneath the floorboards, the hum of danger crawling up his spine. Every lesson, every battle, every decision had led to this moment. And yet, the vulnerability of his marriage, his love, his Emma, everything he had tried to protect was suddenly at risk. Emma's eyes met his, sharp, questioning. He gave her a subtle nod, the promise that he would protect her, even if it meant unleashing every dark corner of his empire. The stranger took a step forward, producing an envelope, thick and ominous. "Inside is everything you thought you'd left behind," he said. "Open it, and decide if your choices tonight were worth it." Ethan's hand hovered over the envelope. Every instinct screamed danger. Every memory of betrayal whispered caution. And yet, a part of him, perhaps the reckless, human part he rarely allowed, was curious. He glanced at Emma. She held her ground, unwavering, a pillar of fire amidst the encroaching shadows. For the first time, he realized that whatever awaited inside that envelope, their lives together, fragile though they were, would never be the same. Ethan tore the seal, eyes widening as the contents revealed a dangerous secret from his past, one that could destroy everything: his empire, his marriage, and the fragile hope of a future with Emma. The city had a way of forgetting pain, but Emma never would. 7 months had passed since Ethan Blackwood walked away. 7 months since the man whose name sent shivers through the Chicago underworld abandoned her. Leaving more than just emptiness, he left a child growing inside her, a life she had not chosen but would fiercely protect. The apartment she moved into was modest compared to the penthouse they had shared, but it was hers. Every corner spoke of survival and calculated independence. There were no chandeliers, no sweeping views of the city, only steel, glass, and determination. Emma spent her nights mapping the streets of Chicago, analyzing the financial undercurrents, and building an empire of her own. She learned quickly, absorbing the knowledge Ethan had wielded like a weapon, but never shared. She invested in small businesses at first, nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention. Her money multiplied quietly, methodically. She had no allies, no safety net, only the sharp edge of her own instincts and the memory of betrayal burning in her chest. Every decision, every calculated risk was fueled by the same fire that had made Ethan untouchable, and it now made her untouchable as well. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams haunted by his blue eyes, the smile he gave her when he thought no one was watching, the warmth she had allowed herself to feel. But those memories no longer weakened her, they sharpened her. Pain had become her tutor, heartbreak her mentor, and in its wake, she had become formidable. Chicago whispered about her transformation. She moved like a shadow in high-rise boardrooms, commanding respect with a presence that was quiet, almost understated, yet impossible to ignore. Men who thought they could intimidate her faltered. Women who underestimated her learned quickly that she was not competition, they were irrelevant. Meanwhile, Ethan's empire, once the pinnacle of power and fear, began to feel hollow. Deals that should have thrilled him were muted. Alliances that had once been his lifeblood felt fragile, brittle. There were whispers, rumors floating on the underground wind of a woman building influence, wealth and power in his absence. His empire had grown, yes, but in her shadow, it seemed empty. Ethan sat in his office, glass of whiskey untouched, staring at the skyline. The city that once felt like his alone now seemed to pulse with a new rhythm, one he didn't control. Rumors of Emma's ascent reached him through hushed conversations and coded messages. His chest tightened. She had survived without him, thrived without him, became more than he had ever imagined, and worse, she no longer needed him. Memories of their shared nights returned unbidden, the laughter, the secrets, the rare moments of vulnerability he had allowed. For the first time, he felt something close to fear, not fear of rivals, not fear of betrayal, but fear of loss, the irrevocable kind. He had given her up once, traded her warmth for power, and now, in the silence of his penthouse, he realized the cost. Emma, however, had no intention of returning to the man who abandoned her. She had learned that survival required more than emotion. It demanded calculation, foresight, and ruthlessness equal to any mafia boss. She had built her own rules, her own alliances, and her own shield against a world that could so easily destroy the unprepared. Despite her success, there were moments when her heart betrayed her. When a certain blue-eyed silhouette appeared in her mind, soft laughter echoing from the past, she allowed herself a pang of longing before steel replaced it. She could not afford weakness, not now, not ever. Her child would never know the same vulnerability she had endured, yet the world of the Mafia is not patient, and power never stays confined. Ethan's name still carried weight, respect, and fear, and hers now did too, though quieter, more insidious, a power that worked in the shadows, unseen until it struck with precision. It was during one evening at a private auction, amidst the whispers of Chicago's elite, that Ethan first truly noticed the change. Emma walked in, confident, composed, every movement radiating control. The room seemed to shift subtly as she passed, the energy bending to acknowledge her. She was no longer the woman who had waited quietly in the penthouse, heart bruised and vulnerable. She had evolved into someone who could exist in his world without needing him. He observed her from across the room. Blue eyes narrowed, a strange mix of admiration, regret, and something darker stirring inside him. This was not a woman he could control. This was not a woman who would fall for a whispered apology or a fleeting touch. This was someone who had taken the fire he left behind and forged it into steel. Ethan's mind raced. Deals, alliances, enemies, all of it suddenly seemed less relevant compared to the realization that the woman he had abandoned had survived, thrived, and grown stronger than him in ways that unsettled him to his core. Meanwhile, Emma's gaze scanned the room, noting every movement, every subtle shift in posture. She noticed him, of course, and a flicker of old emotion sparked, quickly smothered by a calculated composure. She would not let the man who had left her dictate the terms of her life. Not now, not ever. The tension between them was electric, unspoken but palpable. In that room, filled with Chicago's elite and hidden dangers, two forces of nature met again, not lovers, not enemies, but two people whose histories were intertwined in ways neither could escape. Ethan wanted to approach, to demand answers, to reclaim what he had given up. But caution, habit, and instinct kept him rooted. He could not afford to make the first move, not when he had been outmaneuvered before by his own pride, not when every wrong step could ruin him again. Emma, aware of his stare, allowed a small, controlled smile to curve her lips, not out of affection but as a silent declaration. She had moved on. She was untouchable, and she would not falter. The world outside continued unaware, but shadows whispered in corners, eyes observing, measuring, calculating. The Mafia is never forgiving, and power shifts can be lethal. Tonight was a subtle warning, a prelude to chaos, though neither Ethan nor Emma fully understood it yet. And then, as the night deepened, a message arrived, a whisper in the dark world they inhabited. For Ethan, it was more than just news. It was an awakening. A fragment of his empire, a detail of Emma's rise, reached his ears through channels he had never anticipated. And in that moment, he realized the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. She had not only survived his absence, she had become a force that could rival him. His empire, once the ultimate prize, now felt hollow. And worse, he understood that whatever game he thought he controlled was no longer his alone. Ethan stared out over the city, tension coiling in his chest as a voice whispered in his ear through an unseen informant, "She's stronger than you, Ethan, and she's waiting." The rain tapped lightly against the glass of Ethan Blackwood's office, a steady rhythm that should have brought calm. But tonight, calm was impossible. The city sprawled below, neon lights reflecting off puddles on the streets like fractured diamonds. And yet, Ethan's mind was focused on one thing alone. A small, innocuous buzz from his phone. He glanced down, expecting another routine message from a contact or a whisper of a rival's movement. Instead, the screen displayed something that froze his blood instantly. An ultrasound image. He didn't need to check twice. The shape, the clarity, it was unmistakable. His child, Emma's child. Shock hit him with the force of a hammer, deeper than any betrayal, deeper than any bullet that had grazed him in the chaos of his empire. For the first time in years, Ethan felt powerless. Every instinct screamed at him. Panic, fear, regret, they crashed over him, unrelenting. His empire, his power, his control, they were meaningless compared to the revelations staring back at him through the glowing screen. Hours passed, though Ethan felt only moments. The city outside continued its restless hum, unaware of the storm that had suddenly eclipsed the man who controlled its shadows. He had imagined scenarios, battles, betrayals, but never this. This was different. Then, the sound of the office door opening pulled him from his spiral. She walked in, Emma Carter, poised, unyielding. Every inch of her radiated strength, every movement calculated, precise, like a predator who had learned to survive and thrive in the wilderness of betrayal and power. Her eyes locked onto his with a mixture of controlled fury and undeniable vulnerability, a combination that struck at him harder than any bullet ever could. "You got my message," she said softly, though her tone carried steel. "I wasn't sure it would reach you. Maybe it's better that it did." Ethan's chest tightened. Words failed him. Every plan he had made, every moment of detachment he had forced himself into, dissolved in her presence. He wanted to apologize, to beg, to explain, but none of it mattered anymore. He had abandoned her, and now he had been confronted with the consequences in the most undeniable form. Emma stepped further into the office, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She moved with the confidence of someone who had learned to command attention without asking for it. Ethan realized, with a pang of humiliation and awe, that the world had shifted without him. "You left," she said, voice steady but laced with quiet rage. "You left me, and our child. And for what? Power? Wealth? Your empire? Was it worth it, Ethan?" Her words struck him like a bullet. He opened his mouth to respond, but the air felt thick, heavy, as though the office itself were holding its breath. He could only watch her, trying to understand how she had grown into someone untouchable, someone unbreakable, the very opposite of the woman he had left behind. Emma's gaze didn't waver, even when his eyes glimmered with unspoken apology. "I survived," she continued. "I didn't just survive, I thrived. And now you see me, truly see me. And maybe it's too late for you to change anything." Ethan felt the walls of his world tremble. Every decision he had made in the past months, every alliance, every calculated risk. It all seemed meaningless when measured against the force of what she had become. Emma was no longer the woman who had waited, vulnerable, in a penthouse filled with his promises. She was power incarnate, and he had been blind to it. The office door remained closed, sealing them in a bubble of tension and unspoken truths. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to protect her, to make everything right, but he also knew the stakes. The moment of vulnerability could be exploited. In his world, emotions were weapons as dangerous as any gun, and that's when he noticed it. A shadow flickered against the window, barely visible, yet unmistakable to his trained eyes. Someone was outside, watching, calculating, waiting. Danger, precise and patient, hovered just beyond the glass. Emma noticed it too. Subtle but undeniable, the slight shift in his posture, the narrowing of his eyes, the muscles tensed and coiled for action. Her hand brushed lightly against the table, almost unconsciously preparing herself for the unknown. Ethan moved first, stepping toward the window, his body a predator's elegance. He scanned the streets, the rooftops, the alleyways, every inch of the city that was his domain, but the shadow was gone, leaving only the quiet hum of streetlights and distant traffic. Yet he knew better. In the underworld, shadows didn't disappear. They waited, they observed, and they struck when the moment was perfect. Emma's voice, calm but unflinching, broke the silence. "You're thinking too far ahead," she said softly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "I've survived this city without you. Don't underestimate me." For a moment, Ethan was struck silent by the weight of her words. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't waiting for him to save her. She had built a fortress around herself emotionally, mentally, financially, and she had the strength to defend it, and yet, he couldn't let her face this danger alone. Not his daughter, not her, not anything that mattered to him. The tension in the room thickened, charged with a combination of fear, regret, and undeniable desire. Their history, their shared secrets, their stolen nights all collided with the present in a way that was impossible to ignore. Every heartbeat echoed with unspoken questions. Could he protect her now? Could he earn her trust again? Could he survive the threat lurking in the shadows? Then, without warning, a second shadow appeared, gliding along the side of the building, closer, almost imperceptible. Ethan's instincts kicked in instantly. He reached for the concealed weapon in the desk drawer while keeping his gaze fixed on the glass. Every movement was precise, controlled, lethal. Emma moved beside him without hesitation, her posture confident, ready. She didn't flinch. She didn't panic. She had survived betrayals, threats, and abandonment, and now she stood as his equal in vigilance, unyielding. The city seemed to hold its breath. Neon lights flickered, rain streaked against glass, and for the first time, Ethan felt the full weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him. Every decision, every betrayal, every night spent chasing power instead of love had led to this moment. He turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low, almost a growl. But even as he spoke, he knew she wouldn't. She never had, and she never would. A sudden movement caught his attention, a figure darting across a rooftop, vanishing into the maze of alleys below. The timing was too precise, too deliberate. Someone was testing them, probing for weakness. And now, they had the perfect opportunity. Ethan's grip tightened on the desk, his mind calculating every possibility. But even as he prepared for confrontation, he couldn't shake the deeper truth. This wasn't just about threats or territory or power. This was about Emma, about the child growing inside her, about the consequences of his past choices finally catching up with him. The tension hung thick between them, a storm ready to break. And in that silence, filled with anticipation and dread, a single thought consumed Ethan. He could not fail her. Not again. Outside, in the shadows of Chicago's rain-slicked streets, a figure paused, eyes glinting with intent, whispering into a phone. "Tonight, the boss learns exactly what it means to lose everything he holds dear." The penthouse felt smaller tonight. not because of walls or ceilings, but because the weight of words, memories, and unspoken truths pressed down on them. Emma Carter stood across from Ethan Blackwood, her posture rigid, every inch of her radiating controlled fury. The glow of city lights reflected in her eyes, sharp and bright, revealing a storm beneath a carefully composed exterior. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had faced guns, betrayal, and assassins without flinching. He had survived Chicago's most brutal underworld tactics. But standing here, under the piercing gaze of the woman he had abandoned, he felt exposed, vulnerable in ways he had never permitted himself to feel. "You left," Emma said slowly, each word measured, cutting through the tense air like a blade. 7 months. 7 months I had to face every moment alone. Every kick of our child, every sleepless night. You were nowhere. And for what? For your empire? For your greed? Her voice trembled just slightly, not from weakness, but from the intensity of years spent holding herself together, of shaping pain into resilience. Ethan's stomach tightened. He could almost feel the weight of every sleepless night, every tear, every pang of loneliness she endured. He had caused all of it, and the knowledge hit him harder than any threat he had ever faced. I thought I was doing what was best," he said finally, his voice low, strained. You thought?" She interrupted sharply, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing. "You thought abandoning your family, abandoning me, leaving a life depending on you, was the best thing? How dare you?" Ethan's fingers clenched at his sides. His mind raced, searching for words that could undo the past, though he knew there were none that would fully suffice. And yet, he tried, because he could not stand the thought of losing her a second time. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly, almost a whisper. I thought if I built this empire, if I secured power, I could protect you both. I thought I could provide a future without risk." Emma's laugh was bitter, almost hollow. "A future? You call leaving me, leaving our child, providing a future? You chose your empire over love, over me, over everything that mattered." The confrontation crackled with intensity. A collision of worlds: Ethan's life of control, power, and danger, and Emma's world of survival, resilience, and unwavering strength. Every word, every glance, was loaded with history, with emotion, with the weight of the life they had shared and the life he had abandoned. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the quiet hum of the city below, punctuated by distant sirens and the occasional blaring horn, filled the silence. And yet, in that silence, tension mounted, coiling between them like a live wire. Ethan stepped closer, careful, measured, yet desperate. "I can't undo the past," he admitted, voice raw. "But I don't trust you," Emma said sharply. "Not yet. Not until I know you mean more than words. Not until I know you mean our family." The admission stung, yet Ethan understood. He deserved none of her trust, and he would have to earn it in ways far harder than any deal he had brokered in Chicago's underworld. Suddenly, the air shifted. The city seemed to hold its breath. And then a gunshot cracked the night. The sound ripped through the penthouse, sharp and violent. Ethan's body reacted instantly, a lifetime of instinct taking over. He pushed Emma down, his arms wrapping around her in a protective shield. Her breath caught, the sound mingling with the pounding of his own heart. Racing with adrenaline and fear, the source of the shot was unclear. Somewhere on the streets below, shadows moved like living predators, threats lurking just beyond perception. The reality of his world, the one he had tried to shield her from, had collided with hers. And there was no denying it anymore. Ethan's eyes flicked to the window, scanning, calculating, every muscle coiled for action. "Stay down," he ordered, voice low but firm. "Stay behind me." Emma, though startled, moved instinctively into his shadow, understanding that this was no ordinary threat. In her hands, years of hardship had forged instincts sharper than most trained men. Yet even she recognized the magnitude of the danger. They were not simply dealing with a random attack. This was targeted, deliberate, and intimately connected to the world Ethan had once ruled alone. The sound of footsteps on the fire escape outside the building added to the tension, echoing like a warning through the night. Ethan reached for the phone in his pocket, fingers moving almost faster than thought, connecting to his network of informants, enforcers, and allies. The city was alive, dangerous, and unforgiving. Emma's hand brushed his arm, a subtle signal that she was ready, that she was not afraid, not entirely. The collision of their worlds had just begun, and she would face it as his equal, not as someone protected. Ethan's mind raced. Whoever had fired the shot had intimate knowledge of his office, of his habits, of the woman he had tried to shield from this darkness. It was no coincidence. This was precision, planning, and malice wrapped into one lethal intent. The penthouse felt suddenly smaller, suffocating, yet electrified with the raw energy of survival and instinct. Every glance between them was loaded with history, desire, fear, and unspoken questions. Could they survive this together? Could trust be rebuilt amid bullets and betrayal? A second gunshot cracked the night, closer this time. Ethan tightened his grip on Emma, pressing her to the floor, scanning every angle of the windows, the balconies, the streets. This was no random attack, it was a declaration. Someone wanted to force him, to threaten the life he had tried to rebuild, to show that nothing, even love, even family, was beyond reach. Emma's eyes met his, unwavering. "I'm not afraid," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. "Not now. Not with you." Ethan's chest tightened at the words. He wanted to believe it, wanted to shield her completely, wanted to fight every shadow in the city just to prove it. And yet, even as he acknowledged her courage, he knew the stakes were higher than either of them realized. Outside, the city moved like a living entity. Neon lights flickered in the rain. Shadows shifted, merging and splitting across rooftops. Every corner, every alley, every street held unseen danger, waiting, watching, and then movement on the street below. Figures approaching too deliberately, too confidently to be random. Guns glinting, intentions lethal, every step measured. Ethan pressed a hand to Emma's back, guiding her silently behind the desk, positioning them for the confrontation that was inevitable. He felt the adrenaline, the familiar surge of power and focus that had carried him through countless battles. But tonight, stakes were higher, far higher. This was not about territory, money, or respect. This was about Emma, about their child, about the fragile, precious life they were both bound to protect. A shadow detached itself from the darkness below, gun raised. Eyes locked on the penthouse, and Ethan realized the first bullet might be aimed not at him, but at her. The rain-slicked streets of Chicago had never felt more alive, more dangerous than tonight. Ethan Blackwood moved through the shadows with lethal precision, every sense heightened, every instinct screaming warning. Ambushes had become routine, but tonight felt different. The threat was closer, more personal, and more insidious than any enemy he had faced before. Emma crouched beside him in the abandoned warehouse, her eyes scanning every doorway, every shadow. She had been his observer at first, witnessing the raw violence and ruthless strategy of his world, but she was no longer a mere witness. Her mind raced alongside his, plotting, anticipating, improvising with a cunning that even he had not expected. "You see him?" Ethan whispered, voice low, controlled. Every syllable measured, every movement deliberate. Emma shook her head. "Not yet, but I can feel him. Whoever's here, it's personal. They know you. They know us." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had always lived with betrayal as a possibility, deals gone wrong, rivals turning on him, but the thought of someone from his inner circle, someone he trusted like family, moving against him, ignited a fire he could not ignore. The first attack came without warning. Shadows erupted from hidden corners, guns drawn, bullets splitting the air. Ethan moved instinctively, covering Emma, returning fire with surgical precision. Every step he took was calculated, but he also relied on instinct honed over years of navigating Chicago's deadliest streets. Emma did not flinch. She ducked and rolled, her hands gripping improvised weapons, her movements precise. She was learning the language of his world faster than he had anticipated. She was more than a lover now. She was a partner, a strategist, a survivor. The firefight tore through the warehouse, echoing with the sounds of destruction. Crates splintered, glass shattered, and somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. Ethan and Emma moved as one, instinctively covering each other, navigating the chaos with a synchronicity born of necessity and deep, unspoken connection. And then it hit him, a subtle detail, a movement, a glance from one of his trusted men that didn't belong. His eyes narrowed. One of his own had betrayed him, guiding the attackers, creating openings, feeding information. Ethan, Emma hissed, noticing his sharp gaze. "You know who it is?" He didn't answer immediately. Betrayal was dangerous, but confrontation was lethal if not timed perfectly. He observed, calculated, waited for the moment to reveal the traitor without compromising Emma or himself. The warehouse became a chessboard. Each move, each counterattack, each glance from the shadows carried meaning. Ethan's world, the world of power, fear, and loyalty, was being tested in ways he had never imagined. Emma's courage became undeniable. She found ways to turn cover into advantage, using the environment to their benefit. Every movement proved she was more than the woman he had abandoned. She was strength incarnate, intelligence sharpened by survival and heartbreak, courage tempered by fire. The enemy's waves came again and again, but Ethan's focus never wavered. He moved with deadly grace, protecting Emma, striking with precision, dismantling threats as they emerged. And all the while, his mind worked to pinpoint the traitor, the one among his inner circle who had violated trust at its deepest level. A subtle gesture, a hesitation, a glance away from the fight. Ethan noticed it all. He pieced together the puzzle as bullets ricocheted around them, each sound, each shadow revealing the truth. Then, in a moment of quiet amid the chaos, he confronted the betrayer. Words were unnecessary. The betrayal was evident in their eyes, in their posture, in the thin veil of guilt they could not hide. Ethan's voice was calm, deadly, low. "How long?" The traitor's face twisted, not with fear, but with something more dangerous, personal vindication. This wasn't about money, power, or territory. This was about revenge, history, a grudge buried beneath years of loyalty. Waiting for the perfect moment to explode, Emma stepped closer to Ethan, ready to act, but he held her back, eyes fixed on the betrayer. This confrontation was his alone. Trust, power, and betrayal had collided in a way that demanded resolution, and he would settle it with the ruthless precision his name demanded. The air was thick with tension. Bullets still zipped past from attackers who had not yet realized the betrayal had been exposed, but the real threat, the one that cut deeper than any gunfire, stood right before him. "Why?" Ethan's voice was low, controlled, lethal, every word carrying the weight of pain, betrayal, and fury. The betrayer's lips curled into a faint, sinister smile. "You left someone behind, Ethan. Someone you trusted. Someone who paid in silence while you chased power. I waited. I watched. And now, you'll see what happens when loyalty dies." Ethan's eyes burned with blue fire. He understood immediately. The stakes had shifted. The betrayal was not just a threat to his empire, it was a strike at the heart of everything he valued, including the fragile, newly formed connection with Emma. Emma's hand brushed his arm, a subtle signal of solidarity. She would stand with him, but she also understood the peril. This fight was personal, intimate, and far deadlier than any rival attack. Outside the warehouse, the city remained oblivious. Neon lights reflected off wet streets. Shadows merged and split, silent witnesses to the carnage unfolding within. Ethan moved with precision, a predator cornering the one who had defied him. The air was tense, every heartbeat amplified in the enclosed space. The traitor had underestimated him, underestimated the depths of his ruthlessness, the ferocity he would summon when loyalty was violated. Emma watched, awestruck and terrified, as Ethan executed a plan with deadly grace. He turned the chaos to his advantage, using every attacker, every shadow, every move to isolate the betrayer. The warehouse became a stage for revenge and justice. The betrayer realized too late that the world they had tried to manipulate was no longer theirs to control. Ethan's wrath, long restrained, now moved with unstoppable precision. The final moment froze in silence. Ethan raised his weapon, eyes locked on the betrayer, but before the shot could be fired, a second figure emerged from the shadows behind them, weapon drawn. Ethan and Emma had only seconds to react. The true mastermind revealed themselves, closer, deadlier, and more personal than anyone could have imagined. The city had become a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, and Ethan Blackwood moved through it with the precision of a predator, his senses attuned to every hint of danger. But tonight, the usual rules of his world had shifted. The betrayer was still out there, elusive and cunning, testing him at every turn. Yet for the first time in months, Ethan was not alone. Emma stood beside him, her presence steady, her gaze sharp. No longer merely a witness to his empire's brutality, she had become his partner in strategy, equal in intellect and instinct. Every step they took was calculated, every decision deliberate. Together, they wove through the city's underbelly, their plan unfolding with lethal elegance. "You know they're watching," Emma said softly, her voice a mixture of warning and certainty. Her eyes scanned the alleyways, the rooftops, the shadows. "Every move we make, every conversation. Someone's counting on us to slip," Ethan nodded. "I've accounted for every angle. But with you here, we're stronger." His words carried more than strategy. There was weight behind them, a rare honesty he rarely allowed. They moved like shadows themselves, blending with the darkness, slipping past informants and surveillance. Every encounter, every step, was a test of patience, trust, and instinct. The betrayer had underestimated Emma, underestimated her resolve, and that miscalculation could prove fatal. Hours passed in tense coordination, whispered commands, and split-second decisions. Ethan's world of violence and control collided with Emma's world of intellect and resilience, creating a force neither rival nor betrayer could anticipate. Together, they began to outmaneuver the threats, isolating enemies, dismantling ambushes, and reclaiming territory once thought compromised. Yet even amid this lethal synergy, private moments surfaced, small, quiet breaths in between chaos where truth pierced the armor of instinct and survival. In one secluded corner of a high-rise safe house, Ethan's hands hovered over documents, yet his eyes remained on her. "You should know," he began, voice low, hesitant. "All these years, I've hidden more than business secrets. I've hidden fear. Fear of losing control, fear of letting anyone in. Especially you." Emma's eyes softened, but caution remained. She had rebuilt herself from heartbreak, sharpened her resolve from betrayal. Yet she had never stopped feeling, never stopped seeing the man behind the empire, even if he had abandoned her. "You abandoned me," she said quietly, her words cutting through the tension. "You left us. You chose power over love. How do I know this isn't just words now?" Ethan swallowed, pain flashing across his blue eyes. "Because I felt the emptiness of that choice every day. Every deal, every victory, every moment of power, none of it mattered without you. Without her. Without the life I should have fought to protect." The moment hung between them, fragile and taut, like a wire stretched over a chasm. Emotion intertwined with strategy, vulnerability meshed with ruthlessness. Emma felt the pull of history, of love once shared. And yet, she reminded herself, survival came first. Trust had to be earned, and the betrayer was still out there, waiting to strike. A sudden buzz of a phone broke the fragile silence. Ethan glanced at the device, expecting a routine alert from a network informant. Instead, the screen displayed something that tightened his chest instantly, a message. Cryptic, menacing, unforgiving, one wrong move, and everything dies. The words left no room for interpretation. The betrayer had escalated. Every moment of hesitation, every miscalculation, could lead to ruin. And worse, time was running out. Ethan's mind raced, calculating possibilities, contingencies, outcomes. Emma stood beside him, her hand brushing his arm, a subtle signal that she was ready, that she would face whatever came next without faltering. "We have to move," Ethan said, voice clipped, urgency rising. "They know we're planning. They know we're close. One mistake, and it ends." Emma nodded, her resolve unshaken. "Then we don't make mistakes. Not together. Not now." The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of imminent danger pressing against the walls. Every shadow, every sound, every fleeting movement beyond the windows became a threat. The city, alive with neon lights and rain-slick streets, mirrored the tension. Beautiful, dangerous, and unpredictable. They moved again, weaving through safe houses, shadowed streets, and abandoned warehouses. Every encounter with an enemy, every close call, underscored the stakes. Their bond, forged in betrayal and tempered in danger, became a weapon as sharp as any gun or knife. In quiet moments between attacks, they shared glimpses of truth. Ethan revealed the fears he had never admitted to rivals, to allies, even to himself. Emma listened, torn between rekindling what once was and protecting the heart she had painstakingly rebuilt. Trust, love, vengeance, and survival collided in every glance, every word, every calculated movement. And then, as the city slept unaware, another message arrived. The screen was brief, the words simple, but the weight was suffocating. "Tonight, the reckoning begins. Fail, and there will be nothing left." The clarity of the threat was chilling. Every step, every heartbeat, every decision mattered more than ever. The betrayer was no longer just a shadow, they were a predator, precise, patient, and unrelenting. Ethan and Emma exchanged a glance that carried the history of love, betrayal, fear, and unspoken trust. Their survival depended on strategy, courage, and the fragile bond they had begun to rebuild. The rain continued to fall outside, a cold mirror to the storm brewing within. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner hiding danger, and every moment stretched toward inevitability. As they approached the rendezvous point, a figure emerged from the mist, a masked individual holding a weapon, standing between them and the answers they had risked everything to uncover. The reckoning had begun, and no one would leave unscathed. The rain fell in sheets over Chicago, turning streets into slick rivers of light reflecting neon signs and fractured shadows. Ethan Blackwood's car roared through the city, tires skimming puddles, every turn executed with lethal precision. Beside him, Emma Carter gripped the edge of the seat, eyes scanning the rearview mirrors and darkened alleyways, a silent participant in the dangerous symphony unfolding around them. Tonight was not a game. Tonight was survival. Every block, every corner, every shadow carried the weight of revenge, betrayal, and hidden agendas. The betrayer had orchestrated chaos, and Ethan and Emma were forced to navigate it together, partners in a deadly dance where a single misstep could mean death. Bullets ricocheted off metal and concrete as a black SUV attempted to box them in. Ethan's hands moved with instinct, steering through narrow lanes, dodging oncoming traffic, calculating the trajectory of every attack with precision only years of underworld warfare could produce. Emma's hand hovered near the weapon in her lap, ready to act at a moment's notice. Her fear was real, but it was tempered by focus and courage, the very traits Ethan had once underestimated. "Left!" Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the storm. The tires screeched as they veered into a side alley, smoke rising from burnt tires and rain-slick asphalt. The pursuing vehicle followed, relentless. Every move was a test, every choice a gamble with life itself. Emma leaned forward, eyes narrowed, analyzing their attackers' tactics. "They're predictable," she said, voice calm despite the chaos. "They've underestimated us. Let's use that." Ethan allowed a brief, rare smile. She was not only his equal in strategy, she was faster, sharper, more adaptable than he could have imagined. Together, they had become something unstoppable. Their synergy, a deadly force forged through betrayal, love, and shared peril, Gunfire erupted behind them as one of the SUVs accelerated, trying to ram them into the alley wall. Ethan maneuvered sharply, forcing the vehicle into a collision with a dumpster, metal screeching and sparks flying. Emma fired once, then twice, precise shots taking out the driver of the second pursuing car. Within seconds, the threat dissolved, but the danger was far from over. Their car skidded to a halt near an abandoned warehouse. Ethan and Emma jumped out, weapons ready, hearts racing but minds clear. The betrayer was close to close. Every instinct screamed that the confrontation would not be simple. They moved through shadows, silent, synchronized, reading each other's intentions without a word. Inside the warehouse, the scene was chaos-controlled. Hushed voices, hidden threats, and deadly intent filled the air. The betrayer had laid a trap, but Ethan and Emma had anticipated it. Every movement, every placement of their bodies was calculated to protect each other while eliminating the danger. They moved like predators in perfect harmony. Emma disabled surveillance cameras and locked doors, ensuring no reinforcements could interfere. Ethan took the lead on neutralizing guards, striking with brutal efficiency. The warehouse became a battlefield, echoes of gunfire and shouts reverberating off metal and concrete. Amid the action, a rare pause came, and their eyes met across the room. Heartbeats synchronized, adrenaline mingling with a deep, unspoken connection. In the eye of the storm, they finally allowed themselves a moment of truth. "I never stopped caring," Ethan admitted, his voice rough, almost a whisper over the chaos. "Even after I left, even after everything I did," Emma's breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the violence around them faded. She moved closer, lowering her weapon slightly but keeping her vigilance. "And I never stopped fighting. Not for me, not for the child, not for us," she said softly yet firmly. "I can't forget the past, but I'm here. I'm standing with you." The confession hung in the air, fragile yet potent, a fragile bridge between love and the dangerous reality they faced. Redemption was within reach, but it came at a cost: risk, betrayal, and the possibility that not all of them would survive the night. The final showdown was imminent. From a shadowed corner, the betrayer emerged, weapon raised, eyes blazing with a mix of vengeance and twisted satisfaction. Their presence was a stark reminder that loyalty in the underworld could be bought, stolen, or broken, but the cost of betrayal was always deadly. Ethan and Emma moved as one, instincts honed, hearts aligned, prepared to face the reckoning. Bullets flew, crates splintered, and chaos surged, but through it all, they remained focused, coordinated, and unbreakable. And then the moment came: a single choice that would determine everything. The betrayer made a move, exposing a vulnerability, but taking a deadly risk. Ethan knew what had to be done, but in that instant, his mind split between empire, vengeance, and family: the one he had abandoned, the one he had vowed to protect, the one he loved beyond reason. Ethan froze, weapon aimed, heart pounding. His eyes flicked to Emma, then to the betrayer, and he realized the ultimate decision loomed: protect his empire, or protect the family he almost lost forever. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Chicago slick and gleaming beneath the neon lights. Ethan Blackwood stood on the rooftop, the city sprawling endlessly beneath him, alive with shadows and whispers of a world he had once ruled with iron and fire. Tonight, it was not about power. Tonight, it was about life, love, and redemption. The betrayer crouched before him, their weapons trembling, rage and desperation evident in every twitch of muscle. Ethan's blue eyes cold, calculating, and burning with a lifetime of lessons locked on the figure. He had known betrayal, he had known bloodshed, and he had known ambition, but the choice before him now was something different. Empire, built on fear and dominance, or the family he had abandoned and now could never let go. Emma stood a step behind him, steady and unwavering, her eyes filled with a storm of strength, determination, and trust. She had survived betrayal, bullets, and heartbreak, and tonight, she was no longer the woman left behind. She was a partner, equal in every sense, every glance, every movement a testament to her resilience and intelligence. You know I can end this, the betrayer spat, voice trembling with anger and fear. Everything you've built, gone, all because you're weak. Ethan's lips pressed into a hard line. Weak? No, I choose something far stronger than power, something you'll never understand. With precise, fluid movement, he disarmed the betrayer, pinning them to the ground without spilling blood unnecessarily. The decision was deliberate. The Empire, once everything could wait, life, their child, their future was the priority. The underworld could survive without him dominating it. He could not survive without them. Emma moved forward, her hand brushing Ethan's arm in silent solidarity. Together, she whispered. He nodded. Together, they had survived the betrayals, the ambushes, and the darkest nights. Together, they would claim a life free from tyranny and fear, even if only temporarily. The rooftop, once an arena of danger and power plays, became a sanctuary. Ethan and Emma's eyes met, unspoken apologies and confessions passing silently between them. The weight of years apart, the pain of abandonment, the chaos of their violent world, all of it melted into the moment. From the shadows of the rooftop, Ethan reached for his phone, contacting allies, dismantling traps, ensuring no remnants of the betrayal would harm them again. Every call, every command, every order was executed with the precision of a man who had walked the edge of death and returned with clarity. Emma's hand moved to his, their fingers intertwining, a tangible link of trust, love, and shared destiny. We've made it this far, she said softly yet firmly. Now we make the choice that matters. Ethan's eyes drifted to the skyline, the city he had ruled, the empire he had sacrificed, and finally, to the life he had fought for. There, child, waiting below, the symbol of hope and future, flickered in his mind's eye. Nothing else mattered. Power could be rebuilt. Influence could be regained. Love and family, this fragile, irreplaceable bond, could not be recreated once lost. With decisive action, he walked to the edge of the rooftop, securing the betrayer. For the authorities, ensuring they would face justice, but without the vengeance that would stain him further. He had lived a life of ruthlessness, but tonight, restraint became the ultimate weapon. Emma leaned against him, steady, confident, a pillar of strength he could rely on. It's over, she said. We survived. We win, not by taking, but by holding on to what truly matters. He turned, blue eyes softened with emotion, and pulled her close. The cityscape behind them seemed to pause, lights reflecting in puddles, neon dancing across broken streets that had once been the stage of blood and chaos. Together, they descended, their steps purposeful, their hearts aligned. In the safe confines of their penthouse, they finally allowed themselves to breathe. Ethan lifted their child, holding the small, perfect life against his chest. Tears, unrestrained, filled his eyes, not for the battles fought or the empires lost, but for the love that had survived, the redemption that had been earned, and the family they now embraced. Emma rested her head against him, her hands steady, warm, protective. This is our legacy, she whispered. Not the empire, not the fear, but this, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to matter. The chaos, the betrayals, the danger, it existed, but they had reclaimed something far greater. Trust, love, and the knowledge that together, nothing could break them. Yet even in the glow of triumph, a shadow lingered. Outside, on the edge of the penthouse balcony, unseen, a figure watched. Hidden in darkness, silent and calculating, observing their reunion with cold intent. The message was clear. The Mafia world never truly sleeps, and peace was always temporary. Ethan and Emma, unaware of the lingering threat, held their child close, eyes reflecting love, resolve, and the promise of a future forged through fire and sacrifice. The shadowy figure raised a hand, pressing a phone to their ear. A whisper carried across the wind, unheard by those inside. They think it's over, but the real game begins now. The city hummed below, alive, dangerous, and eternal. as the screen faded to black, leaving the world of Mafia, power, and love poised on the edge of uncertainty.